All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It is the Valentine's edition of the Ag Robotics Working Group meeting. That doesn't change anything. It just happens to be on Valentine's Day. So first off, I'll just remind everybody about the in-person working group meeting. I'm sure I sound like a broken record hearing this every single week, but we really want to push it, make sure everybody knows about it, make sure people give time to sign up. So please do that if you are interested in joining. We'd love to have as many people as possible. We do have a few new members this week. I see that Nick Wolf from Agritech North is here. Nick, if you'd like to maybe just give folks a brief introduction of yourself and what brings you to the group.
Yeah, hi. I'm Nick Wolf. I'm with Agritech North. We are a controlled environment agriculture company looking to serve remote and indigenous communities in far north Canada. So we have a greenhouse up in Dryden right now, and we're now working on developing some new technologies and solutions for specifically the challenges of the remote growing season, so that we can provide year-round veggies to remote communities that are harder hit on the supply chain side of things.
Excellent.
Uh, yeah, so I'm glad to be here. Excited to see what y'all are about and see how I can participate.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Happy to have you. We have a couple other new members, but I see that they are not on the call this morning. Is there anybody here who's never introduced themselves that would like the opportunity to before we move forward? No? All right, perfect. With that, we will head into the presentation portion of our meeting for this morning. This morning we are joined by Jay. I apologize if I get your last name wrong. Jay Apollon.
That's good. That's good. Thanks, Dan. Yeah.
Excellent.
So I'm new to this. So how long do we have for this typically, the presentation, Dan?
Somewhere in the 20 to 30
Okay.
minute ranges.
Perfect. Okay. All right.
It gives time for questions and things at the end.
Okay. So I'll just share my slide just for some content. Do you see my slides?
We do, yes.
Okay. Good. Good. Thank you. Let me. Yeah. Hi, folks. I'm based in Texas, a bit warmer than your area, but so I'm based in US, and we have a small engineering business which supports agriculture and research folks in environment with the data collection and interpretation, right? So, and over the last 10 years, we have had lots of wide expertise in a wide geography, including Canada. So our partners, Microsystems, based in Toronto, they said your group would be a good one to share some of our experiences, although not a whole lot on robotics, but there's a lot of relation to robotics, which I'll just briefly mention. Okay. So we are, like I said, we are a real-time data collection and analytics company that mainly supports growers, row crops, tree crops, and even small and medium farms in North America, and resource conservation agencies, mainly water conservation, and several academic and government researchers. And we are distributed across the US and like 5 or 7 locations in Canada. Yeah, it's not intentional that I missed Canadian map here, but this is the one we had. So we work with a wide range of agencies and large private groups, including Canadian ones. So just begin. So we have a product or a solution which is based on a cloud platform, but heavily dependent on field sensors right from mostly like soil, water, air, and plants. We monitor those to help different use cases and markets, mainly in agriculture, but also in resource conservation. So we use uh, wireless networks of different types, mainly long range radios, which covers like several miles with like a small box, so which makes deployments very easy in especially rural areas. We don't work in urban areas. For rural areas, long range radios and satellite work really good, especially in the Western US and Western Canada, where we don't have very good cellular coverage. And most of our use cases don't need cellular because these sensors they send very small packets. Typical sensors include soil sensors, radiation sensors, groundwater, plants, fruits, and atmospheric conditions. So these range from very simple to really complex scientific sensors. And we use it all for the purpose of either increasing yield and the quality and for agriculture or conserve resources on the agencies and nonprofit side. So typical tools we use are a cloud-based IoT platform that ingests different kinds of data and analytics. And a core part of it is the wireless network, which I'll just talk about today. Right. To increase the adoption of these technologies, and at least on the farming side, we make solutions or applications which are very intuitive to use, so which is very appreciated by farmers who don't have time to look at like charts and stuff. So we just bring everything to like a single screen, 10-second, they know what to do. So that's the goal of our agricultural side efforts. And all these lead to resource conservation in some sense, which I'll come to. So in terms of natural resources, which needs to be conserved in agricultural environments, which is the topic that I was supposed to cover today. So there are two types, abiotic and biotic, as you know. So we need to conserve soil, water, air, and indirectly minerals like phosphorus from fertilizer, which is a limited resource. And the biotic side, we also look at forest health, animals, both livestock and wildlife, and some in the aquatic area. So what I'm going to cover is just an overview of what kind of sensors or parameters are being monitored currently, commercially, and in the conservation space. So it might be interesting for you. Okay, so I'll come back to this later. So water conservation is one of the topmost things that we do. And these three segments are the core for conservation. One, looking at the sources and looking at how they are extracted and used for agricultural use, and how to optimize it during the usage. For sources, we look at groundwater levels, right? You know, in almost all parts of the world, groundwater table is going down a lot. And if you don't measure and manage it properly, everybody is going to be in trouble. So in Western US, in Texas and California, at least, there's like the laws are getting more and more stringent in conserving that. Especially California, they have a very strict law passed 10 years ago. And so now people used to monitor groundwater levels once every year manually. Now we are doing it every hour. Right. So, and at a very dense scale in really remote areas and very difficult areas to meet the challenge posed by that law to bring back the water to where it was like 20 years ago or something like that. So we use groundwater transducers probably 300 to 1,000 feet down, and So we can deploy like a very dense network to help model. The hydrologists will be able to model and advise agricultural growers on what is the best way to conserve them in different seasons. On surface water, we have to monitor how much the canals and the streams and rivers in different areas, which were never monitored. So now we are looking at the surface water levels and how they are being diverted for use through weirs or pumps, flow meters. So we can monitor exactly how much is coming into the canal, how much is being diverted to different agricultural use. And part of this is tracking how much each area has gotten precipitation. So as you know, typical weather stations are placed every 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers or something like that. But now we are doing it more granularly. So with just a rain gauge with a wireless transmitter at a really dense scale allows hydrologists and meteorologists to model water or predict or forecast what would be the available water for the next season. So we help with setting up dense precipitation networks, at least in the Western US. And so looking at water quality is another major thing because agriculture environment affects water quality. So any runoff from the fields, either to over irrigation or over precipitation, over rainfall, washes off the nitrates and phosphorus into freshwater areas. And those things can be managed only if measured. So it is possible to have very low cost sensors in a very dense way. In Florida, we are looking at 2 or 3 lakes where we have a simple electrical conductivity sensors, which could be a proxy for noting where the nitrate pollution may be coming from a field or from a livestock operation. So monitoring sources and how they are being used could help in conservation, water conservation in terms of quantity and the quality of water. And for irrigation, we look at using as little or water as possible, right? So that's the goal of conserving water in agriculture. So we have to look at a combination of soil, the plant, the atmosphere, including the light from the sun, to advise the farm managers on how to optimize irrigation. So for groundwater status, typically we deploy either long-range radio or satellite telemetry to measure aquifer levels, like I told you about. For irrigation, we look at the pumps, so they operate efficiently and conserve electricity, which is indirectly related to climate change and air quality. And flow meters. So other parameters include rainfall, evapotranspiration, and general weather parameters. So we make it easy, really easy to deploy these things. And it's cost effective to deploy them in a very dense fashion, right? So the environment is very challenging, especially for groundwater monitoring, because the hydrologists they look at the map and they just put the dots based on the geology of each location. But when you go there, most of the locations don't have good cellular coverage, or it's just plain difficult. This one is right by the side of a highway, and the monitoring wells are underground. So cellular signal is not even coming out. So we have to figure out ways to efficiently get data without somebody having to go change batteries every month. So we have to be really innovative in getting data from the environment to the geologists or modeling folks from very remote areas. This particular one is in New Mexico. So it's like 2 hours in the desert from the highway. So it runs with a small solar panel. You get like a 500 feet down, we get water level every hour. So that saves a lot of cost for the operational cost for these resource agencies. And a similar thing for precipitation. Typically, people have manual precipitation rain gauges, which just fills up. So they send folks around long distances, measuring every 2 weeks, which was not accurate and very intensive in terms of fuel and operational efficiency. So we deploy very simple systems, which helps people, again, model and also determine allocation for farmers that year. So how much they can pump out based on the precipitation levels. So having a dense network of these rain gauges helps. And also these help with cloud seeding operations in some areas. Okay, so the data can be used for different purposes, but it's really easy these days to get very good quality, dense, spatially dense and temporally dense data. Another key thing is ET, evapotranspiration, as you all may know. In agriculture, that is the core, especially irrigated agriculture. So people use modeling and weather forecasts to determine that, but now it's quite more advanced sensors are in place. So to measure actual water loss from the crop and soil surface, to very precisely irrigate very large area row and tree crops. So this particular sensor is based on the flux principle, if some of you may know. So it measures wind speed or wind eddies 10 times a second using an ultrasonic anemometer. And it also pulls air using a pump and continuously measures the number of water molecules pretty much. So we get very precise estimates of how much water is lost every 30 minutes. So instead of end of the day, from the weather station calculating how much is lost, you actually see how much water is lost from the crops, which helps with models of the crop models. You can determine how much cotton is going to use over its lifetime during that year, or a tree's dynamics, which can be used for other areas in other fields in a region. So we use these advanced sensors in combination with soil and plant sensors to get really good estimates for different crops, and in the process conserving water. Okay, and this is an example of a flow meter in very remote area. People blindly used to pump 24 hours a day for 3 months in New Mexico. So now they are able to quantify and also take actions based on weather conditions. And we can see the benefits of using sensors by actually measuring their water inputs. This is an example of a large center pivot where we look at the water use over a year. Same issues with horticulture. Here, one thing with strawberries, you may know this is a strawberry field. So you need to keep the soil very saturated to get good crop quality, but you can also easily over water, and all the water goes through the soil profile and is lost if it's a very sandy soil, and in the process pushing out all the fertilizer. So you lose fertilizers, and you also spoil the root health. So you may get root diseases, and affect the yield. So measuring gives a very good sense for many farmers that we work with, measuring the soil water content. And we are being very precise about when to turn on a pump, how much, when it actually hits the root area, and automatically stop it. So things are getting very precise, and we are preventing overwatering and erosion and runoffs from the soil. So vegetables, that's the same one. Okay, frost is one thing you might be very familiar with, and we work with a lot of fruit farms and blueberry farms in Michigan, where they use sprinklers to water to protect the buds and fruits from frost. So we measure in canopy temperature, humidity, sometimes radiation, to estimate or forecast the risk of frost damage. In citrus in California, we have to advise when to turn on wind machines, which pull warm air from 100 feet above that canopy to keep the fruits from damage. And for bud protection, they turn on sprinklers, which cover the bud with ice to protect it from frost damage. So the timing and the volume of water, it can be very precise about when and where to stop the sprinklers for frost protection. So using like good quality air sensors and soil in some cases to know, because in soil, if you know, if you are able to maintain the right water level, it can store more heat. So it can help with frost management. So looking at soil and air conditions during winter and spring, we are able to give very good advice to farm managers, and in the process saving water, since water is used for both soil and the bud protection type activities. Okay, so this is a different one. So to looking at the plants for tree crops, we look at how a tree trunk moves throughout the day and night, and we can determine water stress, whether it's overwatered or underwatered, and accordingly advise how much to water, how much to irrigate. So this particular one is in an almond farm in California, so where we can see very good dynamics. It means different things. The tree is growing correctly, but there is too much water in the soil. So when you put optimal soil, you'll see the tree swell and shrink in a particular fashion. And you can cut down the water at different stages of the crop, and it flattens, means the tree stopped growing, but the nuts are drying out as they want. So looking at a few millimeter variation in your circumference, you'll be able to infer a lot on when to irrigate, how much to irrigate, which directly translates to water savings. Okay. And another critical thing we look at is sap flow for different crops. The tree crops, we insert like sensors to see how much volume of water is lost every 30 minutes or every hour, and try to compare it with the atmospheric demand from evapotranspiration. And so using these 5 or 6 data sources, soil, water, tree physical size variation, sap flow rate, and the evapotranspiration. So we use all this information to optimize water use in irrigation. Okay. And in terms of soil conservation, the key thing is erosion. And so lots of fields are flood irrigated in the US and Canada, most likely. And so in many cases, we just wash out the topsoil. So optimizing irrigation and stopping the flood irrigation as soon as the water hits the right depth of the water all across the farms, it's very critical to minimize soil loss. So that's one critical thing for soil sensors in flood irrigated fields. And oxygen indicates multiple things, that soil structure is good, and it's not over inundated with water. And people are using like nano bubble generators now to increase the amount of oxygen available to the roots, and it has other benefits to improve soil health. So we can monitor soil oxygen status and optimize your nanobubble generator timing and how much water you put. And depending on the root depth, you can optimize the irrigation patterns. And all these also impacts can be used to determine how compacted your field gets as tractors go over it and all other cultivation practices. So we look at all these parameters from soil, infiltration rates, and oxygen levels to advise if the soil is in good status or not. So yeah, irrigation is part of the soil conservation. So, okay. So this is a energy cane plot in Texas where they grow, it's a modified sugarcane, genetically modified sugarcane, which is used for fuel production. But these are all flood irrigated. So here, water conservation and soil erosion prevention are like a key. And we have a dense network of soil sensors. So these researchers can advise the local farmers on the best practices for irrigation for that particular region. So we do these kind of experiments or support researchers in different areas to understand and develop models and use how to optimally use these sensors in production environment, right? So ultimately, we can conserve at a large scale when this knowledge is transferred to actual growers. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this. Okay, on the soil side, we look at several parameters, including water content, and there's a water tension or a metric potential is another aspect of it. So instead of looking at a single number, you have to look soil water in a two-dimensional way to make sure the crop gets the right amount of water, but also we prevent water loss or fertilizer loss due to overwatering. So there are like 30 different sensors we use for soil from different models. So depending on the crop type, region, soil, so we kind of combine different data sources to advise for water conservation. For forest, so the thing is, there are different aspects of forest health we can monitor. One of the things that we work with in coastal areas is because of the ocean sea water rise, the salt water goes through coastal forest affecting, they just die, but they die at a very slow rate. So there are researchers who study the health of trees and in the coastal areas and find ways to mitigate it if possible. So you can look at sap flow, you can look at the same dendrometers or look at the leaf health. There are leaf sensors you can look at and forecast what could happen to the coastal environment over the long term. And using the evapotranspiration and other advanced weather stations, so we are able to evaluate large scale water use, which is a complement to the remote sensing methodology from satellite images. So we have one project with the NASA where we are validating their new remote sensing sensors using our ground-based more accurate sensors. So ground truthing remote sensing data with in situ sensors is a big thing for resource conservation, right? So because lots of decisions are taken based on remote sensing, which are affected by cloud cover and other atmospheric conditions. So having ground-based sensor networks are critical to validate those remote sensing methodologies. And the carbon sequestration is a big deal. And so there are different ways to measure it with multispectral complex remote sensing methods, but also ground-based sensors, just physically measuring the dynamics and applying it to large scale models. And some of the new thing that we are working with some universities in Michigan especially is looking at the effect of viral diseases, how they affect the dynamics of trees. So this basically is the forest part, the biotic part conservation, where we deploy many wireless sensor networks. Um, Okay, so this is typical. You look at the size variation in micrometers. It's a very precise sensor, but these have to be wireless because you can't have wired sensors in forest or agricultural environments. So you have to have very good, robust but compact systems to measure all these things. Lastly, this I think I shouldn't take more than a few minutes. So on the animal side, we do have sensor networks for wildlife, livestock, and fisheries in the marine environment. On the livestock side, water conservation is key because you need to make sure the cattle get enough water, but at the same time, you don't want to waste water because some of the water troughs get like they just overflow all the time in many areas. So just making sure you use enough water, just supply enough water that's needed for the cattle is important. And groundwater pollution because of the output of the cattle, if you don't manage it properly, all the nitrates and other chemicals could reach the groundwater and pollute it. So looking at how those water dynamics happens, how much rain falls, how much is water is used by the cattle, and how it goes into the ground are monitored by sensors, mainly for compliance purposes in different regions. Sometimes it's just because of the business owner wants to proactively do that. And for wildlife conservation, because of unpredictable nature of rainfall, lots of endangered animals just die in some seasons. So there are agencies which protect them, and they build artificial water sources for them, just collecting rainfall and storing it in a single place, and also track the migration patterns of wildlife. And these are all becoming really cost effective with the newer satellites. And we have our own satellite hardware products where we use low Earth orbit satellites, which need very low power, and they cost very less. So you can tag animals and track them pretty well, and make sure they have enough water or other resources using these conservation activities. On the fisheries side, water quality obviously is a very good, important thing. And we work with some universities and support them in development of sensors for detecting bacteria and virus that affect in aquaculture, both in fresh and marine water. And in general, just for fish, wildlife, fish in the wild river, that type of area, we can help them detect any spike in water pollution. So people can take mitigative actions. That's a typical livestock location we work with. And we look at the weather conditions using novel sensors or good sensors to estimate how much water may be needed for the cattle. So you can plan for it and just pump that much from the groundwater, and supply to these animals. So core body temperature modeling is one activity that we do by calibrating for different types of animals against the weather conditions. Yeah. So that is an example. Well, I'm not going to go through greenhouse, but there is some conservation activities there. So yeah, that's about it. So if you have any questions, I hope I didn't take too much time.
No, absolutely. You're pretty much right on the dot. So thank you
Okay.
very much.
And I'm sorry, Dan, lastly, so I didn't mention the robotics part. I know your team is on about robotics. So we work with some universities and farmers on detecting fruits and the fruit sizes as so when you want to do it all across in a large area, so we have to go for the robotic route. The drones don't help, and sometimes we measure like the size of the trees and fruit. So we can do some exploration on that side, but almost all the things that I said can benefit from robotics because if you have autonomous smaller robot that can independently go around almost all the topics I talked about, whether it's aquatic or on ground, they can really benefit from that. So I'm just giving you a sense of where the demands are commercially for us. So it may be useful for your research. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
We did have a question that came in the chat just now. What is
Yeah.
the average lifespan of these sensors before they need replacing?
So typical one, I'll give you the for soil sensors, they go in the ground and they can stay for 10 years, right? We have had things for like almost 6 years in many of the production grounds. They work really good. But again, very sensitive equipment may need some maintenance. But in general, we choose sensors that are very robust because these are all in harsh environments. So majority of them at least 5 years, I think, yeah.
Perfect. And we had another one. Which cloud provider do you prefer using, Azure, AWS, or another?
I think it doesn't really matter because the way we do is we don't use any specific services they provide. Like we use AWS, right? But the thing is, if we want to move, we can just cut and paste to Azure because it's better to develop independent systems. Your own, let's say you have your own Linux system. Uh, it's better to or your own database. So it doesn't matter, in my opinion. It's just a cost and convenience of the user. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Noah asked, is there any calibration required or a way to verify the readings?
Right. And many of them may not need much calibration. So once you calibrate it, for soil sensors, once you know the soil type, then you can calibrate it, or it usually confirm if the sensor is the default calibration covers certain soil type, but some need periodic calibration. Water quality sensors, for example, may need even like monthly calibration, but water level depth you don't need much calibration for 5-10 years. So it totally depends on the type of sensors, right? Whether it's chemical sensor or electrical sensor. So typically electronics based sensing like electromagnetics, they don't need much calibration, but any chemical based sensors need very frequent calibrations. Yeah.
Eric wanted to follow up and ask, do the sensors you use need to comply with a certification body like NIST or another?
No, unless the user is using for that specific purpose. It depends on the use case. For us, the absolute value does not matter very much once you know how it responds in a given environment. So then you're able to like mentally or with the software you can just shift it, calibrate it, and typically they don't move around very much. But if there is a drift, we can have methodologies to adjust it in the software level than going replacing or physically calibrating a sensor, right? And some places do need NIST type certifications. For example, we work with national labs, like nuclear facilities, where they monitor certain environmental parameters. So they need to comply and need certifications. So that, yeah, sometimes you do.
All right. We had two more questions, and I'll cut off the questions at those two just so we can get to the rest of the agenda items. But Jason asked, are all of the sensors wireless? If I understand correctly, mostly LPWAN and satellite to overcome the cell reception challenges.
almost all of our sensors are wireless because it allows because of just the environmental harsh conditions, you can't have wired sensors for damage from animals, people. So we keep it very compact and away from prying eyes. So LP1 and satellite are the most, but if you need more frequent data every second, you have to go cellular. So that's a optimization you have to make during the design stage.
Perfect. And lastly, from Carl, yes, in addition to the evapotranspiration sensors, how many in-field sensors are ideal to monitor field soil moisture under the pivot?
Yeah, so ideally, the pivots, a quarter mile pivot takes like a week to go around. So you may need about 7 ideally. So you get each section like per day, but it's too expensive for row crops. So we just have one sensor, one soil sensor, a multi-depth sensor, typically, and uh, I think 4 would be ideal if they can afford it. But the way is, if a farmer has 10 pivots, they can take the learning from one in the same region and apply it to the other. So I would suggest at least 4 per pivot to get a very good sense of what's happening. Yeah.
Excellent. Jay, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and thank you for your presentation. We really appreciate you
All
taking
right.
the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely. All right. With that, we'll move on in the rest of the agenda. Upcoming demos, no new ones added. Yesterday was the Eco Robotics Info Day at the Holland Marsh. Wondering if did anybody attend and have a quick update they'd like to provide? No? All right then. Um, Perfect. Next week is the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Convention in Niagara Falls, so make sure to stop by the Agrobotics Working Group booth and say hi. Project updates. We have started to receive research applications for the upcoming season. What we're going to be doing is reviewing the applications, reaching out to the applicants, asking them to present their research proposals to the working group. And then it'll further after that, it'll go into more review by the research subcommittee. If you haven't already indicated you'd like to be on the research subcommittee, please shoot us a message or send us an email, let us know. We can add your name to that if you'd like to be part of sort of the decision making process on any of those applications. OCTE, the Ontario Council for Technology Education, they are quoting us on building out a high school level robotics competitions for the innovation farms. And we'll use the framework to guide a post-secondary competition. As we get more details and things are more finalized on that, we'll pass on that info to the group here. Action items based on some feedback that we got from last week's meeting. We have decided to go ahead and we've created a private group on LinkedIn for Agrobotics Working Group members. So this can be a way to hold more casual conversations between members outside of the confines of the weekly meeting. So I've included the link in the agenda. I'll just, while I'm here, I'll copy it and throw that into the chat as well. So we're going to be making sure we're going to be checking everybody who asks to join it, making sure they're a member of the working group. So we should have only us. So hopefully that will be a good way for everybody to connect alternatively. So we'll sort of see how that goes, and people are liking it, then we'll keep it going. If it's not great, maybe we'll try to find some other means of doing it, but we'll try this for now. So definitely check that out. Um, and we may also create a shared folder, but we're still toying with that. Yeah, Bridget, go ahead.
Thanks, Dan. I was going to give Mary Ruth the opportunity to just to speak to briefly. It's not a full presentation, but just to one of the proposals that we had, just an aspect of time between this week and next week. So Mary Ruth, if you wanted to just give a quick overview of the one that you had submitted.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Bridget and Dan. Many of you will be aware that UV light is being used to control plant diseases, especially in vineyards. It's been found to have some effects on some insect pests as well. And the project we're proposing is to look at UVC light to see if it will control seedling weeds in the field. And of course, this is all tied to robotics because the robots would be the implement that would move the equipment through the field. So we're doing a controlled environment study. We have the UV light table equipment. We're doing replicated trials, focusing on both broadleaf plants and grasses or monocots. Some weed species don't germinate when you want them to, so we're looking at some crop species. For broadleaf, we're looking at edible amaranth as a plant that's very similar to a lot of the amaranthus type weeds like pigweed and lamb's quarters. We're also going to get, or hoping to get, seed of the herbicide-resistant pigweed to evaluate, and we're also using lettuce as an example of an asteraceae, which includes lots of the broadleaf weeds as well. For monocots, we're looking at onions as a crop, and oats or brome grass as stand-in for grassy weeds. So these are replicated trials, 4 reps, 40 plants per rep. And the main thing we're looking at is the length of exposure needed to kill or have an adverse effect on the plants. So we're starting out with 30 minutes, which is relatively long. And then based on the results, we'll cut that by half and then by half to see how the minimum amount of exposure that will kill or damage the plants. 30 minutes doesn't work. We'll go up to an hour, but we're hoping that it's going to be much less than that. So our assessments are how many of the plants die, but also we'll do a rating of damage, and we'll also do a rating of top growth because the exposure to light may, or the UV light, may damage and stunt the plants without outright killing them. And we're going to repeat the trial. So we'll have a nice replicated trial that we can do the statistics on and come up with some reasonable parameters for which crops are more sensitive and how long an exposure is needed. So that's the quick summary.
A fantastic quick summary. Thank you. So just out of interest, we next week are going to speak a little bit more to some of the other ones that have been received too. It's just we wanted to give enough time, and Mary Ruth's proposal was a bit more put together when we got it. So thank you for that overview. Did anybody have any questions for Mary Ruth?
I saw that Conrad from Connexio was looking to have a chat. So Mary Ruth, if you're okay with that, I'll share your email address outside the meeting.
Definitely, yes.
Perfect. All right, I'll connect the two of you a little later.
Okay, Dan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you kindly. Heading on to our job board, our friends at Upside Robotics are looking to hire a couple new employees. They're looking for a junior software engineer and a junior agronomist. So if that sounds, if you know somebody or anything like that, check that out. The links are on the agenda there to our job board. Funding announcements and opportunities. We have a new one, the Food Tech Next program. The program guide is linked in the agenda here. The intake opens February 24th and the deadline is May 26th. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I'll open the floor up to our round table. If there's anybody who has any questions, comments, queries, thoughts of any kind, now's your chance to share.
I think Noah's on now from Area XO.
Alrighty.
Hi,
If he
yes,
wants,
I'm
if he wants to introduce himself.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Noah. So I recently got hired onto the Ottawa Smart Farm, which is managed through Area XO. And my background is mechanical engineering. So I just recently finished my doctorate in mechanical engineering. So very excited to be part of the group.
Yeah, both Chuck and I had tours of Area XO in Ottawa this week when we were there, and they were very gracious. There's a lot of good plans going on for summer demos and events, and I think we're going to try to get Noah down for the March 7th London Farm Show get together. So hopefully he can make it.
Yeah, I guess I should maybe add too. So basically, our focus at the Smart Farm is working with smaller, medium companies, obviously pretty tech focused to basically test or implement or potentially help develop them. So if anyone falls into that boat, I'd love to have a chat. A lot of you are probably familiar with Suzanne too, who's also part of this group. So that's who I'm working under for reference.
Awesome.
Someone on the group may know this better, but have we had a presentation recently from Area XO? This might be good to regroup on that.
We're currently working on setting up a
Fantastic.
presentation with them.
Okay, awesome. Dan, you're one step ahead of me. Thank you.
No worries. Perfect. Conrad, to your question there in the chat, you can, if you have a link to the job listing, it's on our website, so you can send that link to me, and I'll be happy to put the link up on our board.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We do.
Mary Ruth?
Yeah, I was going to mention earlier, but when you talked about the Ontario Fruit and Veg Convention coming up next week, Jeff Farintosh will be doing a presentation on our agrobotics results. I'm doing a presentation, and that's Thursday morning at the convention. I'm doing a presentation in the afternoon on plant nutrition, and I'll talk briefly about our work with the piccata tissue analysis also. That's also part of our agrobotics project.
Excellent. Thanks for that update. So there's going to be a lot of good stuff happening next week. So definitely make it out to the Fruit and Veg Convention if you're able to in Niagara Falls. All right. Were there any other additional thoughts or comments?
Is Dan from Untethered still on? Maybe he can give us a quick update on AgBox, the project.
Yeah, hi Dan. We're still working through a lot of the funding stuff on. We had very good response to the working group presentation, so I see a couple people that have been on and I've been working through. KPG MG came back from Canada saying they can help with some government contacts to get funding. So next phase is just to get the commitments on the dollars and get the articles of incorporation written and everybody started.
Good, good. And did the launch at Fira go okay?
Yeah, it was very well attended. We had probably 21 contacts that expressed interest in working in the group.
Excellent. Glad to hear. Alrighty then. I think that will bring us to the end of the meeting for this week. Once again, I'd like to thank our speaker, Jay, for taking the time to join us this morning. We really appreciate that. Everybody, thanks for your...
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody, thanks for your participation. Have a good Valentine's Day, a great long weekend, and we'll hopefully see you at the Fruit and Veg convention, but if not, then we'll see you next Friday morning. Thank you, everybody. Have yourself a good weekend.
Thank you.